Hey, welcome back to Solutionary TV Presents Ascension Series. I am your host, Dr. Tatiana. And tonight I'm really excited to be able to circle back on a rather momentous moment. Just recently, I have tapped in and shared with many of you here in the audience that there were two conferences that were back to back, one in Mount Shasta, and then another one just recently in Loveland, Colorado, called Dimensions of Disclosure, where there was brought in from the four corners of this earth all of the experts that really are about moving society forward, getting society into a place of understanding that there's so much that we have been fed that has dumbed us down and kept us ignorant, and that we really are ready for now. We don't need to be protected by big brother. We don't need to be shielded from the media to know what has actually gone on in human history, what our experiences are and our vulnerabilities may be from those that are off-world. And Dimensions of Disclosure was a big step in the right direction. And there I did a mini interview with someone that I really enjoyed chatting with. It was one of those casual experiences of, hey, you look like you're cool. Can I sit next to you and charge my cell phone? And that led to a lot of really engaging discussions and into an impromptu interview that many of you can find that is on our YouTube channel and also on our website. But I want to reintroduce her here tonight because we're going to go a lot deeper, and you're going to hear what tremendous expertise that she has when it really comes to this disclosure topic in our secret space program. I am welcoming tonight Joanne Richards, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She is the executive director of the educational nonprofit Earth Defense headquarters. Her husband, Mark Richards, and his father, Ellis Lloyd Richards, were involved in top-level military intelligence operations since World War II, many including on-world and off-world contact and battles with various alien species. Joanne speaks about her knowledge of military operations and secret meetings that both of these men were often involved in. She shares information about the numerous alien species, for which there really are quite a few, the secret space fleet, and the battles with aliens both on and off world. This is really going to be a thrill and engaging tonight. Welcome, Joanne. Thank you so much for indulging us and being with us again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You bet. So there's a lot to discuss, but of course, it's always those serendipitous moments, isn't it, Joanne, where we meet somebody in a way that wasn't exactly contrived, and it ends up being some of the best and most engaging conversations. You were just so much fun to meet at that point.
How are you?
Thank you. And the volume is not grand, so I'm just going to have you lean in just a little bit, and we're going to tweak it on our end because there's not one thing that you're going to be sharing with our folks tonight that I want them to miss. Joanne, let's talk a little bit about why you are doing the work that you are doing. Many, first and foremost, know that to speak about these things without having it being sanctioned by the powers that be is not popular. Very often it comes with a lot of loss of reputation and, professional and personal attacks. And there is reasons why you're here speaking for your husband. So maybe give our audience a little bit of background about why you're doing what you're doing, why it's you, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, as you said in my intro, my husband and his father were doing high level in military intelligence. Basically, both of them from the time they were teenagers on through their adult military careers, and involving UFOs, aliens, on and off the planet, the beginnings of the secret space program, before people were talking about a secret space program. And in 1982, my husband was framed for supposedly masterminding a murder that happened here in Northern California. He's been incarcerated ever since. I met him in 1997. We courted for several years, and we've been married for 16 years. And after several years, he started giving me reports about things that he used to be involved with, some of the things he can talk about. And so, he said, well, why don't you go to this UFO conference? Like, okay. And I knew a little bit about what he did. And then by the next year, I had more of his information, and I was having a booth at that same conference. So I'm here because he can't be here, but he is continually in the know about what has happened and what is happening currently on and off the planet. He's been around up close and personal to hundreds of species. The wealth of his knowledge and experience is unbelievable. And so I am loving what I'm doing because I'm really engaged in this material, and I want to share it with as many people as possible. It's gone beyond my husband's got cool information, and I'm the spokesperson to, yes, I really get this. I believe this. I want more. I want to meet aliens someday. So I'm all in, and I'm here to share the information.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say to our audience, and I think that a lot of them are keyed into what the world is really like in terms of disclosure and being in the know and having inside information and speaking out against the establishment or possibly speaking out against agreements that we might have been forcibly contrived into signing or being a party to, and then becoming a whistleblower / way shower. It's a very unpopular place to be. I recognize that some of the greatest movies, whether you're talking about a Born Identity or 007, if you are someone that needs to be silenced, we know that the establishment knows how to silence you, and you're either going to be personally attacked, lose your reputation, lose your career, your life's work, or you're going to lose your life. And this is pretty common. We had a former congressman on the show back in the middle of last year who is also a friend and a colleague of mine. And he did not always toe to the party line when he was sent to go about peacekeeping in the world. And when he realized down in South Africa that he was about to be a patsy by having been assigned to do a very unpopular vote that would have switched the balance of the apartheid down there and made him actually look like the fall guy, he simply withdrew from participating at that level. And it basically showed that the emperor had no clothes and that there are a lot of agendas that are just smoke screens. And he served time in prison for that. He definitely took a hard fall, but he had integrity, and he talked about that. And I hope that a lot of members of our audience are already keyed in. These types of things happen all the time. So the message and what you're here to talk about, Joanne, is the fact that we are not alone. We have really never been alone. But in your understanding, how long, based on your husband and his father's testimony, has our own military been involved in actually creating liaisons and allies with some of these extraterrestrials?
I would say definitely. I think the early treaties, I don't have any notes in front of me, but definitely there were treaties in the 40s, the 50s. The famous ones with Eisenhower, but even before that, Nikola Tesla was talking to aliens in the 20s, and the different military intelligence people were dealing with aliens in the 30s and 40s. So this has been going on, and aliens have been coming here for thousands of years if they weren't already here. Some species are native to planet Earth, but and there's evidence of that all around the planet. If you just walk in some caves, and there's paintings and things, but the military and certainly people in the know have been involved with this definitely since the 20s. And I know my father-in-law was sent, his father, there was an incident with, before we got into World War II, a certain reptilian species was creating havoc in the American Southwest with the Nazis, again, before we were involved with the war. And my father-in-law, as a teenager, was sent there to help deal with that. So, he was involved before he was officially in the military. And my husband's been around aliens himself since he was a baby.
Right. So let's talk about this. How does someone like your father-in-law, as a teenager, not even already requisitioned to active military service, how does he find himself in a peacekeeping mission with some renegade extraterrestrials in the Southwest? Tell us a little bit about this story.
Here, his father was Ellis Lloyd Richards Sr., who was an expert electronics engineer, ran an electronics college, was in several think tanks, was part of the Manhattan Project, was, liaison or meeting with the president. So he was, good family ties is what it is. And sometimes when the father couldn't go to Europe on certain, do something for the president, they sent Mark's dad as a teenager to see what he could find out. There was one time in the 30s, right before the Germans got into the war, invaded Poland. Sorry. And no, I'm thinking, sorry, different episode. But anyway, one time he was sent there in the 30s, probably to go to some royal wedding or some important wedding or something. But he actually was, and the Nazis wanted to recruit him, so they were showing him all kinds of their secrets and what they were working on. And he basically, put it up in his head and left with a bunch of secrets and came back. And even the Russians had given him some of the secrets to bring back to the United States. So a lot of it is because of who his parents were. And his other grandfather, they both worked with Nikola Tesla on different projects. So they both come from very important family lines. So
that's a really rich history. And I find it fascinating because you don't always think about the right to know to be passed down in a dynastic way or, within the family line and a legacy. But there are attributes that make certain people very good with wisdom and knowledge out of the ordinary. Maybe we have more intuitive abilities. Maybe we've been more conditioned, throughout the generations within certain family lines to have a much more contained fight or flight response, for instance, or like you said, with the military training, right? That there has been some important conditioning that was there. Is that how your husband ended up getting involved? Was it that he was always kind of groomed to be in the military and come to have a relationship with these? Because you said he's been in developing relationships with some of these beings since he was a child. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Basically, his background is basically he's half German princely families from the Rhineland. So you're kind of brought up with the German. I don't know. I'm half German. And his other half is pretty much everything from the British Isles and Celtic. So he is very intuitive, and he's a very good soldier. And so, like when he was born, before he was born, his dad met the Raptor species that I talk about a lot. And then when Mark was born, 2 months later, the Raptors showed up in Marin County with several spaceships, and they all went to the water district and did the whole, hold up the baby, the naming ceremony like you see in The Lion King. So he has a scar from that where they do a kind of a blood brother thing. And then when he was 7, his dad was involved with a big interspecies conference in southern England. And Mark was there as like one of 2, young children that were allowed to play with the alien children whose parents were at this conference. So, and even before that, I have this great story that he wrote, he dictated it to his mom at 2 or 3, probably 2. The family was living in Ohio, and his dad was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And a lot of us know that there was a lot of alien stuff and weird stuff that went on there. Mm-hmm. And he got to go to work with his dad one day, and his story is about, I rode down the elevator with my dad, and I saw these little green men. And it's like, oh, that's a cool story for a 2-year-old to dictate to your mom. And she wrote it up, and he drew some pictures. And so he's had these contacts ever since he was a baby. And he had thought nothing of playing with various alien children. He just thought, oh, great, more kids to play with. They went on like field trips all around southern England, and one of them became his best friend, and they fought on missions together. And he's friends probably to this day with several of them that are still alive.
And now that's so phenomenal because that's going to bring up all kinds of questions. A child that doesn't have a huge untamed fight and flight response, that doesn't immediately go into fear, having a relationship with beings that might look predatorial to a
Right.
child and might and we know that we have the ability to create an adrenalized blood. We know that we can give off pheromones that smell of fear, that are attractive to other beings that are on our own planet, that have a predatorial nature to it. Now, you've mentioned that his best friend was technically of a dragon caste or a dragon species, but they look like what we would understand from Jurassic Park to be a velociraptor, right?
Correct.
We're
You call
circling
them
back
some
on this.
yes.
So, what is it, as he described it, to have a best friend relationship? I mean, what kind of a delicate dance are we talking about in terms of knowing, there's not going to be a lot of tumbling and wrestling going on. They're not going to be throwing.
He just saw Craig. Craig was the kid's name, and he saw Craig just as another kid. Two boys having fun, and they probably did do some roughhousing. And they did go on military missions together. They went on dates together. And you could block off various hotels or whatever and go dancing, based on who you're with and things like that. So yeah, they had a lot of fun.
How did they communicate, Joanne? Are we talking about them being able to learn one another's languages, or was there more of an intuitive? Can you describe that?
Sure. The Raptors they are very good at telepathy, and so is my husband. So that's one way. Sometimes you communicate through your elemental beings that you have with you. That's another way. The more elite of the Raptors have operations on their voice boxes so that they can speak human languages. So Craig could speak human languages, but Mark is very fluent in Raptor. So he wouldn't have been when he met them when he was 7, but over time he has grown to be able to speak their language. So he does speak their language, and he trained with the Raptor military before he left high school. So they've done intermilitary things with each other. He's flown their craft. So
Okay. So it's really fascinating. And I think that we're always looking for corroboration and external validation. I mean, I know that I was as an experiencer. The first thing we want to do is we want to question our own sanity. How stable were we in the moment? Are we being influenced by anything? But in truth, there have been many that have corroborated that that have been part of the secret space program, are inside some of these black operations within the military, that are black budgeted, that have said, well, hey guys, we knew that we had dinosaurs on the planet. Did it ever occur to you that there was a ruling caste at one point for them? And there have been those that have confided that the dinosaurs were food for a higher ruling caste of would be reptilian type of beings. And then there has also been some corroboration, quite a bit actually, through Corey Good and Cosmic Disclosure, David Wilcock through Gaia TV, about the fact that we have had an inner Earth species that look like raptors, that are very intelligent, that are highly advanced in their technology. Some of them have kind of a raptor predatorial nature to them, and a very territorial nature to the areas that they guard in some of these inner Earth caverns, and very highly facilitated cities. And so you hear a lot of these different things, and you kind of go, okay, this isn't completely unprecedented. How was it that you came to take on some of these stories and build a texture around being able to now share it with us with so much confidence, Joanne? It's very impressive.
well, thank you. I don't know, because it's not like I've met any of his friends. And what I tell people mostly is that we talked for a long time before we even got married. It's like we courted for 5 years, and it's not like before we even got married. And again, and it's not like the first thing out of his mouth when I met him is, "Oh, by the way, I used to, play with dinosaurs, and I know all these aliens." We got to know each other very well, and he had me researching things for the family history and just things I didn't even know what I was researching. And now that I'm, reading more of his reports that he's finished with, oh, okay, there's a piece I researched. Cool. So it was more that we had developed this total trust, and know each other very well. And I do have evidence of some of his military activity. And no, none of them say you're assigned to an alien spaceship, but they're clearly top secret orders for, military things. So it's like, I know he's not lying to me about that. And I just know him. It's like, he's not one to share stuff and have me out in the public sharing it if it wasn't true, because he doesn't want to be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his credibility is already shot just because of the fact that they've thrown him in prison.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to have me out there all around the world saying stuff that's really going to be embarrassing. It's like, no. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons I know that he's giving me the truth.
Right. So. And if you're going to be incarcerated on false pretense, you do very often find yourself in alignment. And it sounds like he's very much in harmony with this. He's standing on the principle of, listen, this is what I did. This is what I believed in. This is the sacrifice I made. Whatever they managed to tag me for. And I understand that even the grounds upon which they are holding him for a life sentence is not the same penalty that was assessed to the individual that actually committed the crime. I mean, I believe you and I discussed the fact that the way the courts handled this was completely outside the law.
Right. We need to do a whole nother show on that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean,
yes, he got life without parole. The other guy got 25 to life.
So again, these should be much cleaner when you're talking about the kind of conviction that the law has. If they really believe that they have their man, the crime should fit the punishment, and the punishment should fit the crime. And it does definitely leave you wondering and feeling quite leery about it. So let's come back to some of the other species, because you did a very powerful PowerPoint at the conference, yes, about many different types of interplanetary species, many of which are air-breathing and mobile hominid type beings, as well as aquafarian and beings that we might experience or not necessarily see for ourselves, but there's been legend and folklore about that happen to live in the depths of our sea. Do you want to kind of hit some of the highlights of those beings you find the most fascinating?
Sure, and what's interesting too is, and a report or a book that he hasn't finished that I only have parts and pieces of, he was working on kind of like an encyclopedia of lots of species. Here's nuggets about way more than I ever talk about. And so like the talk that I give is the tip of the iceberg. But I talk a lot about the raptors, and they do look like the velociraptors from Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, and I love those movies. But again, they originated here on this planet. They are built for running. They eat live food. They work with our military. Their empire is run by an empress. They raise their families very strictly, but they love their families. They're educated. They have really good senses of humor. He tells me funny stories about them all the time. But that's just one. There are other reptilians.
Real quick, before you go on, you said that they were on the planet before mammals rose to being, again, populated with human life here, and that they had left. Can you touch on that? We did discuss that when we were in Colorado, just to give some background for our listeners. What was the story with that?
Well, and in fact, some version of humans, we were on the planet at the same time as them. They just called us hairless apes. They thought of us as rodents. But many of them left the planet millions of years ago to colonize space, which they did. They have a vast empire out in space. Some of them were left behind on their bases that were on the moon and Mars and underground here on Earth. And 65 million years ago, an asteroid hit the planet near Yucatan Peninsula. And so, that wiped out a lot of them. The ones that survived evolved into a more human-looking, they walk upright, they don't have a tail, their snouts aren't as long. They still kind of probably look scaly a little bit, or maybe leathery. They have very sharp teeth. They still have like a 3-claw foot and sharp claws on their, if you want to call them hands, they're not hands, but, and they, like I said, they are more human looking, but they tend to work with terrorist groups, and they are to this day. And I don't know, and I know they have one base in Africa. The Raptors have several bases here on the planet in addition to their empire in space. The other reptilians, there's the Dracos that a lot of people know that name. I don't know a lot about them either. They think they're pretty smart apparently. I don't think they come here a lot, but they're not nice. They originated in space. They're not friends with the Raptors. Um, but their empire in space. If you look at neighborhoods or whatever, I can't describe this very well. But if you kind of looked at a star map, their territories are kind of close together, which is relative when it comes to space. But the Dracos are Dracos, and the Raptors are called the Draconian Empire, which is, I know it sounds similar, but they're totally different. And the Raptors do call themselves dragons. There are other space originating reptilian species that I really don't know anything about. I don't know anything about them. There are, like you said, ocean living. There are creatures that live in the ocean. Some originated there. There's one that reminds me of what we see in the movie Abyss, kind of plasma, see-through-ish, jellyfish-looking. But you can see through them, and they're light beings. But they can take on the form of, like, if you want to see a mermaid when you're out on the ocean, they can become a mermaid. If they want to come on land, they have to take on the body of something that's just drowned, whether it's a person or a mammal. There's octopus-looking creatures in the oceans that aren't very friendly. And some of them originated here. Some of the species came here and have made their bases under the water. There's a squid-like species. It looks very squid-like, very large squid-like. When they come on land, they have to put on a bio suit so they can, walk around and breathe. And there's a couple. Oh, there is a species, and I love this. That a lot of times they'll take on the form of, they'll look like a dolphin. So maybe when you're swimming with dolphins, you don't know if you're swimming with the polymorphs or just a regular mammal dolphin. So, and I've never had that opportunity, so I don't know. There are several insect species. Some are friendly and some are not, but one of my favorites is a little beetle-looking creature that looks a lot like, their twin here on Earth is what we call a water bear. So they look like a ball of chocolate pudding. And again, when they're above ground and on the surface of the Earth and stuff, they have to wear like a biohazard suit. But they're very small. And so maybe their mothership, I think their scout ship might be the size of like a small football or maybe even smaller. Their mothership is considerably bigger, but it's probably not the size of like what you and I would, go out of space in. They were an interdimensional creature, and they have cloaking technology. They were tricked into coming here to Earth thinking, they were told that there was nobody that lived here and their world was dying or imploding or whatever. So they came here. There was some kind of space battle. Their mothership crashed, and several military groups were racing to get to this crashed ship, as well as several New World Order type corporate groups like Bechtel. I'm just going to keep throwing that name in there. And my husband at the time was in charge of something called Operation Moon Dust. So that was in charge of crash retrieval and debris retrieval. And before he got to the crash site, he met a group of the little beetle things. And their name, very long name, but it's the initials spell out the word Ediths, Ediths. And anyway, they became very friendly. They talk telepathically with him, and they were very surprised that he could see them. And he said, "Hello, I'm Captain Richards, and how can I help you?" And after the whole incident was all over, and the U.S. military captured the mothership, we helped them establish one or two bases here on Earth. So they're probably, in terms of numbers, because they're so small, they're probably the largest group here on the planet, but they're very friendly and they do help us. So that's one insect. The mantids are another insect type, and we were just talking about the mantids yesterday because I had a totally different kind of picture. I thought they were all spindly and weak looking, but apparently the adults have very muscular arms. They've got several arms and several legs and a big head and this mandible that will open and shut, and then smaller pieces to their jaw, and their eyes can see in all kinds of directions. And he's been friends with them since, again, he was 7, and they do tend to help our military when needed.
Wow. So you just went through several different types of species, and I know we're having a little bit of a challenge with the volume. I just want to apologize to our audience. We're doing everything we can to amplify Joanne's voice. And Joanne, if you can just not touch the keyboard, I think that might be our magic ingredient at this point. But going back to the species that you said that was part of a crash and a retrieval and the mothership, what were those beings? They were a type of insectoid, is that correct?
Correct. They were a little, he calls them a beetle type species, but the picture of them, they don't have like a hard beetle shell, but they look like the roly-polies that I remember as a kid. If you touch them, they'd roll up in a ball, but these without a shell. So they're kind of soft looking. Their bodies look soft. He describes them as like chocolate pudding. And they're like the size of a raisin. So they're not big at all. And so, again, their ship size depends on how many of them are in there. And their initials spell out the word Ediths, EDITHS. And the first word is like extraterrestrial, dimensional. I don't know. I always have to look at my notes because there's some things that have very long names. But they're very friendly. I mean, his kids used to play with them. So they're very friendly, but they're very advanced. I mean, they have like sonic weapons and things. And this crash happened in 1978 in Bolivia, near the Bolivia-Argentina border. And it's like the Roswell of Bolivia.
Wow.
May of 1978.
It's kind of amusing because when you take the full scope of what you're sharing, there's a lot of things that we take for granted as human beings. Number one, we're always so much more comfortable with things that look more like us. We're conditioned, right? But then we also have a tendency to feign disbelief or greater deniability when something is infinitely larger than we are or infinitesimally smaller. So the idea of a very highly intelligent race that is no larger than a raisin and could bring in an entire fleet that is no bigger than maybe the room that I'm in probably seems really inconceivable to folks. So let's play with some of the information that you have here, because this is meant to be a playful as well as a serious dialogue. We want to educate, but why not have it be entertaining at the same time? Let's talk a little bit about why our military, through some of these special or special black ops or secret space programs, these entities, these systems that are in place, why are we working with these beings from outer space or interdimensionality? What are we hoping to gain from your husband's perspective and that of the legacy of intel and military officers that are his family? What were we hoping and what do we continue to hope to gain by working with them and providing them safe quarter here on the planet?
Sometimes it was basically the need to protect the planet, because several of the missions that I know about that he will, at least 3 for sure, that he was involved with, there were invasion fleets coming towards Earth in the 70s, and the secret space program of that time needed to protect the planet. There used to be an international security agency that was formed in 1947 by the United Nations to do just that. So in time of international threat on or off the planet, you would have personnel from several countries. So like the whole world thought we were at Cold War, and we were, but when it was needed, there were personnel that would come together to defend the planet. And at the time it was formed, Admiral Nimitz was the head of that. When he died in the mid-60s, my father-in-law took that over. So a lot of times, and probably one of the main reasons I can talk about much of what Mark shares is because a lot of times, he was under orders of the U.S. military, which we do not share his part of those things. He might share like what happened, but not his part, because he still has oaths that he's abiding by. But a lot of times he was under orders by the international security, or he was working for another military or whatever. So that's why we have the valuable information. So the other reason is, I mean, we've been going to space since the late 40s. After World War II, the Air Force had ran the Rand Corporation designed a rocket. So we've been going to space since the 40s, and then in the later 50s, one of Mark's like great uncles, and that's Theodore Taylor, and then another scientist called Freeman Dyson. They developed a battleship size spaceship, and they built several. Our country built several or two, and then other countries each built like one, and a couple of corporations built some. So you had 9 of the battleship size and then smaller sizes. So that's what became our secret space fleet. And it was active for years. I mean, it started in the late 50s, and by the time Mark was part of it, that was in the 70s. And some of the ships were destroyed over time, and I don't know what's happened to any of that now. He just, smiles his funny little smile when I bring it up, because obviously somebody's defending the planet still, and I know there's aliens that help us do that, but we have to have something out there. But anyway, beyond that, sometimes aliens want to come here because we have a really nice planet and we have natural resources, and some of them want the natural resources. Some of them just like to come here for vacation. Some would like to trade with us. Most all of them do not want us out in space, so they knew we were in space definitely by the 50s, and that was beginning to concern many of them. So this conference in 1961 that I mentioned was organized in southern England, and it was authorized by President Kennedy and by the Prime Minister of England at the time, I think Macmillan. And they, told the military and other government leaders organize this. So my father-in-law helped organize it, and he ran security for it. So you had hundreds of species coming in by sea craft, by spacecraft. Some were coming in through interdimensional portals that were in the area. I have been to this part of England where this took place. I've been to the Abbey where they had the opening ceremonies. I've been to the ruins of a castle where the keep has an interdimensional portal, and you can still feel the vortex there, and it's just in the middle of a little town. And I haven't been to all the sites. I've been to like one of the castles where the Raptors stayed. I've been to one of the castles right on the port where just one night, a bunch of them went there, and they probably had a meeting there. Some of the species had a meeting there, and but Mark was playing with the alien kids while the adults were meeting. So sometimes, and it's they're working out treaties. How much are we going to allow you to go out in space? Can we sell you our used spacecraft? How many people can we kidnap in exchange for technology? So it's kind of a give and take, and these conferences have, taken place other times, and, they've worked out a ban. We're not supposed to openly communicate with civilians and aliens, and that part of the treaty is still in place. And if you notice, publicly, we stopped going to the moon in the early 70s. That was part of the 1971 treaty conference. So they really don't want us going out in space and finding where they are and horning in on their like mining operations and things like that, and just disrupting what they have, because we're slobs out in space. We've left a lot of debris, and we're not always friendly. We shoot first, we don't ask, and then we ask questions, because some of the friendliest species are very scary looking, and maybe some of the scarier looking ones are pretty friendly looking.
I see. So let's get a snapshot on how they perceive us, because I've heard you say 2 things that really catch my attention, and we touched on them a little bit in that first brief interview that we had in Colorado. And the first one is, why do we not make good bedfellows in space? I'm just going to, again, stay on that playful end. What is it about our lack of development in consciousness and our lack of spatial understanding with regards to how our sentience clashes with other sentience is a still ongoing problem as they perceive it? So that would be the first question. But the second question, I just want to tag in there, and then you approach these as you see fit. The second question is, how do they see us if part of the trade that they are looking to have with this planet, both with our governments or corporate agencies or these secret projects, if they also see that part of the trade is human life being removed off planet? So start with the first question, and we'll evolve inward from there, Joanne.
All right. Part of the issue is we don't know how to communicate with them. And I had this great quote in my talk in Colorado that I use a lot. It's like, and again, even back in 1961, Mark learned from his alien children friends that, just lost my train of thought. The thing is, most of the aliens are so far, they're much older. Their civilizations are older, way older than we are. They had a hard time considering humans as being sentient beings just because, you know, we were hairless apes, rodents, when they left the planet. And now we want to be, working with them. But, and again, we go into space and we're territorial and we just want to take over stuff. Well, we don't like it if somebody wants to come over here and take over us. We defend the planet. So, who's to say, what are the boundaries? I'm sure there are boundaries. I don't know what the boundaries are. But again, we don't know, if you don't know how to communicate with them, you could think you're saying, hello, how are you, in any given language, and you've just told them they're the ugliest, most stupid thing you've ever seen.
Right.
And now they're going to eat you for lunch because you've insulted them, or you're going to cause an intergalactic war.
I remember you touching on that last time, Joanne, and there is a lot of seriousness while we wink and smile at that statement, because we recognize that as we are developing our consciousness, we have not mastered as a species our mental and emotional faculties. We have a lot of fight and flight. We have a lot of nervous, knee-jerk response, and we've been talking about this. We are so much more than five senses. We do have this underdeveloped sixth sense that is about, telekinesis and clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience and claircognizance and so many others that allow us, that if they were more developed, if we actually could calm the monkey mind and manage and nuance those emotions better and rehabituate ourselves to be more receptive, we would make far better interstellar species in a much more cooperative way. Is that what I think you're saying? And unfortunately, because of how we are habituated down here, how we're educated, how our society thinks we're hiding behind a smile with all kinds of rogue thoughts, the truth is we are the emperor's no clothes in front of them. They see right through us and can see when we're disingenuous. Is that correct?
If you look at, like, the raptors, for example, if you look at the dinosaur, they have sharp claws and scary looking teeth. I mean, their mouth is full of sharp teeth, and they drool, and they look at you like you're food. So if you never met one, and if you didn't know anything about their culture, you wouldn't know that they have very strong sense of family, and they love to educate their children, and they are highly educated. They create beautiful operas about their heroes and their history. And they're much more environmentally thoughtful than we are. They don't do anything to harm this planet. If they need to manufacture something, they'll go off planet and manufacture it. Mm-hmm. They don't build, they build their bases underground. They don't build big concrete buildings above the ground. Mark has related some of their love poetry to me, and I can't understand a word of Raptor, but it is the most romantic sounding poem you've ever heard. I can't explain it, but it is. And they just, again, if you just thought of them the way they look, but again, some of them, they have very colorful and beautiful markings. So if you look past the sharp teeth and claws, you would see a whole different picture. And if you were willing to communicate with them and understand their culture, and this goes for any culture, because in 1971 at the conference that was hosted by the Shah of Iran, he had to learn how to say hello to, maybe 200 different alien species. Mm-hmm. He would have started a huge war if he didn't say it correctly. So
there's a lot of discipline to that. So we recognize that being a a really evolved spacefaring race, spacefaring species is so much more than our technology. It really is bringing our humanity up to the point where we see each other with a level of respect, just with those that are part of the human species on the planet, and then understanding the sentience of the planet. This isn't our planet. This is Mother Earth, Mother Gaia. We share it with all the other plant and animal kingdom. If we could just get that mastered and learn how to create a sense of rapport and respectfulness and maybe more intuitive communication, we might be able to graduate
Right,
and be better with this trade
right.
and diplomacy and empire building. So let's talk about the fact that there are some that do trade and have traded, maybe not all in this reptilian or draconian cast, that see us as not just merchants, but also merchandise. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Correct. And from what I understand, the raptors, I don't know that they have been among the species that have like a quota, like we'll kidnap this many for, we'll trade this technology. And they have learned not to eat us as a general rule. And it, if you they're not big on the kidnapping. I know that. The reptoids are huge on that, and they work with the greys on that. And insect species called trogs are big on scooping up thousands of people. And sometimes when there's a big natural disaster and bodies are never found, it's because they've been taken somewhere else. Now, for whatever reason, and maybe it's partly because we're yummy, and um, partly because we're yummy, but partly because species have lost the ability to reproduce because of the environmental conditions on their planet or in their world and whatever. So, and I'm sure because they don't really think of us as sentient beings and as advanced as they are, so they don't value our human life as we would. Many of them have said, "Hey, if we can have 100,000 people, mostly young women or children, each year, then we'll give you this much technology, whatever it is."
Mm-hmm.
And so governments and corporate groups, they have made deals right and left. I mean, there's like as the conferences were ending, then our military people were discovering about side deals that were being made. Forget those people were going to forget the treaty or ignore the treaty and sidestep and say, well, we're not going to do that anyway. We're still going to kidnap, because I mean they would have big arguments. My father-in-law, was obviously on our side, but very adamant against, no, you will not kidnap the humans
Mm-hmm.
and take them off planet, because they are used for food and sex and reproduction and slaves. So
This is such an unpleasant topic, and I know that it takes a lot of courage and a lot of steely determination for you to not only learn about it from your husband and his father and this legacy that they've left, but also to be able to articulate it in a way that is intelligent, that can be corroborated from other sources that would say, yes, come on, guys, we've known this for a long time. Humans do this to each other. Humans have done this to each other since the beginning of time, and what may be a domestic pet here in the United States is in a cage and getting ready to be eaten, for dinner in China or other areas of the world. We can't be so grossly ignorant to what happens when you have a lack of consciousness, or you happen to have a degree of dissonance as an intelligent being that doesn't see that sentience or doesn't see the same respectable consciousness in the life that they have in front of them, which may be us at any given time. And so it's touchy. We don't like it. It makes us uncomfortable, but I appreciate that you broached that topic so that we
right,
can see it from a bigger perspective. And then, what do we do? We're always looking for the solutions. So Solutionary TV is, you can't know what to do if you don't know what is. So we're going to touch on some of these hairier topics and then go into that moving forward on how do we educate ourselves in an intelligent way, be able to articulate our concerns, and then build teamship, community, and corroboration so that we can find ourselves on the negotiation end, on the diplomacy end, rather than on the screaming, frenzied, hair on fire. We
right.
still look like we are, intellectual and conscious idiots or infants. So, with what your husband has known, what they've shared, What was their agenda in working forward? I know he doesn't have the same contacts now, maybe doesn't know how much further along the programs have become, but what was their goal for educating the public over time and having complete transparency globally?
Well, we're talking about the military. I don't think there was a plan to be totally transparent.
Mm,
Um, the timeline that was given to me was that in the year 2031, when they would have another conference, they would set a date for disclosure. So I don't think the military has ever really, that's never been their high priority. Because in their opinion, even to today, most people around the world can't handle it.
yeah.
And there, obviously, there's a lot of us that are discussing it, so we can handle it. But again, if you saw a 9-foot cat walking into the room who just wants to study your archaeology of your area or have tea with you, that still might be kind of scary. I mean, there's some wonderful species who have no interest in kidnapping people. They just come here to study. Some are just export commodities out to space. That's their whole business. I mean, and so again, my mission is to help educate the public about the possibilities. I don't think that's the military's mission,
Right.
and not to fool anybody. My husband is still in very close contact with many people who are still active. So he is fully engaged with a lot of very current information.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think that the dialogue is ongoing and we have made progress, haven't we, Joanne?
Yes,
Because it didn't, those that have been following the program for a while have heard me say this before, but not everybody is, started at the beginning. For those of you that are jumping in, we have had global disclosure and it started here in this nation. I mean, we've been talking about this throughout Europe and Great Britain, and a lot of documents have been made available through the Freedom of Information Act, redacted statements that have been, and documents that have been made available in Great Britain and here. But we did have last December members of the Department of Defense, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, members of the Pentagon come out and say, yes, yes, at least for the last 70 years plus, there has been unidentified aerial phenomenon. Yes, we have learned from this phenomenon. Yes, there is crashed craft, and obviously there was something that was flying it. This showed up in the Huffington Post, New York Times, it was on CNN, and it actually originally came out in October. So we're making progress. I think it's because more in the public are starting to demonstrate that there is a developmental ability to get over that mammalian fight and flight and honestly a completely um, dismantling of self that we experience that I think is hardwired into our DNA. As mammals, we know what it is to be predator and prey. And I think it's the prey part of us that has us come completely out of our skin when we see something threatening and immediately, we run for the hills. And that is not a developmental response if we are going to be diplomatic and we're going to move forward. So I'm excited that we are moving in that direction, and I appreciate that you're sharing it. You have this nonprofit foundation. You have this work. Let's talk in the last few minutes about what is the goal of telling the story and some of this work with the nonprofit going forward, Joanne.
Again, it's basically helping to educate people to understand what different species are like, what the military's been involved with. I mean, it's not the only function of the nonprofit. I also get into other areas of cryptozoology and magic and creative arts. But again, there's those areas kind of intertwine with the whole ufology thing. So Mark is constantly coming out with new reports. They might be about historical events, but they're things that none of us grew up learning in school.
Mm-hmm.
And a fun note, I know we're about to close, but a fun note is, I have a report about raptors going on vacation in Scotland. Yeah, and they do. But the fact of the matter is, the Scottish people have legends of interaction with dragons and dinosaur beings going back, hundreds of years.
Yes.
So they're used to them being around.
It's fascinating. If you think about it, a lot of the folklore and the mythology around dragons in Norse mythology and Celtic mythology, in a lot of the Asian countries, in China and the dragons. I mean, this is This is so obvious, it's almost painful. We just have so many people that have come to believe that it's all about imagination. And what they don't realize is that in this 3D realm, which we share, this third dimensional, third density, and fourth dimensional, fourth density, which is sleep, unconsciousness, etc., everything does exist. If you've heard of it, then there is a reason you've heard of it. Do you really think you're the first person who imagined it? Chances are it has been imagined before, it has been birthed into reality before, and it has some context. And if you're now stumbling on it, maybe there's some information that you're meant to make your own and better understand the universe and the world. And so if you were to say, just sky's the limit, Joanne, to our group of listeners, we have anywhere between 5 to 10,000 on average for every live show, and we have a lot of open minds. What do we need to understand for the military to be able to come forward, as you understand it through your husband and his family, to get over our cognitive dissonance, to be able to step out of fear and fight and flight and deniability and really encompass the fullness of our sentience and our capacity for evolution, so that we can really start seeing the world as it is, rather than constantly having a smoke screen laid over us and be treated like we're children?
Well, and it's twofold, because again, I don't want the public to think it's all rosy. I do, like Jurassic World, like Men in Black, like the bar scene in Star Wars. There are those things, and they sound funny, but they do exist. The movies got those things, ideas from somewhere. These kind of things do exist. And, again, I keep saying to people, I want a place big enough where, my alien friends can fly in, we can have tea, the grandchildren can all be there, and we're friendly. Now, there's some groups we're never going to be friendly with. There's some groups that are totally involved with terrorism on this planet at this moment, that either work with known terrorist groups or who start fires. And, so I'm not going to paint I don't want people to live in fear, but I don't want them to be naive enough to think all groups are going to come here and just be our best friend.
Right.
So
it's kind of like humanity. We really do have well-intentioned, benevolent souls that would like to create a world peace construct and concept and move into a Star Trek style, new age of travel and exploration and observance of other evolving cultures and species. But there are always going to be those that are running their free will in ways that can be malevolent, destructive, threatening to our own free will. And we just have to kind of keep a lucid eye on that, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Love it. Love it. Are there any closing thoughts and any websites or some of the connection points with your social media that you'd like to direct our audience back to, so they can stay better informed and on top of where you're going to be speaking?
Okay, great. I've got two websites, edhca.org and edhq.org. I have a Facebook group for Earth Defense Headquarters. But first weekend in October, I'm going to have a booth at the Portal to Ascension Conference Center in Irvine, California. The last weekend of October, I will be speaking and doing a workshop at Stargate to the Cosmos in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow. You are staying busy, Joanne. We are really grateful for the wisdom and the just the calm, clear, intelligent delivery that you provide when you share what you do. I feel like I got the best benefit of getting you twice, once on site and in such a playful way, and now just to get a deeper and more entrenched understanding of the story and the direction that we're going. Thank you for being so candid, and thank you for joining us tonight.
For having me anytime.
Absolutely. And I want to say to our audience, we're coming in here tonight from Raleigh, North Carolina. And for many of you, you're aware that there is global change upon us. This isn't just an issue that North Carolina is experiencing with the incoming Hurricane Florence and the destruction that she brought in right off of our local coast. These are my beaches. These are my friends' homes, my family's homes. I right now have refugees in my home waiting for me as I'm getting ready to wrap up this show and get back to them and their needs, their food, their clothing, their shelter. Let's put a real compassionate eye towards what's going on with the globe. We have more tropical storms and hurricanes globally, unprecedented change. We're having global earthquakes. We're having unprecedented volcanic and seismic activity. There is a lot going on. There has never been a greater time for compassion. And we know that when you join with us and you watch these shows, when you stay on top of some of the things that mainstream media isn't giving you, especially as evolved and developed as we're trying to give it to you, because it's about seeing all of us as one humanity rather than the fear porn and the eccentricities of what's happening here, there, and a kind of a hopelessness. We are about Solutionary TV, and we are glad that you support us. You are part of our family and our community. We love you. We are here for you. We thank you for supporting you. And I want to give a shout out to Lynn, one of our regular listeners. Lynn recently pledged $100. She has no idea how far that helps us being able to keep our productions coming together. Lynn, you rock, and I hope that you see this. And for the rest of you that have some loose cash to toss, take a look at Solutionary TV and decide whether or not you'd like to be one of our sponsors and our patrons. People like Joanne and all those truth tellers out there, trust me, they're putting a lot of time in to be able to bring this truth to you that is not going into regular careers, that is not going into fortifying themselves financially. We're all in this together, and remember, with our gratitude, together we're the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.